Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your real ID at tsa.gov/real ID. That's tsa.gov/real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.
And we're back after the long holiday break. I don't know why Joe Biden chose to put both Christmas and New Year's in the middle of separate weeks, but surely that is what cost him the election, and oh boy, what an unforced error. Well, let's just dive right into it. One of the less remembered players on the great early 20th century Chicago Cubs teams was pitcher Lou Ritchie, Elwood, Louis Ritchie. I can't hear the name Elwood without thinking of a live Blues Brothers take. I think it was on Rubber Biscuit, perhaps, in which, after Dan Aykroyd finishes his part of the song, John Belushi shouts, "Elwood! Elwood!" I can't shout Elwood, Elwood here. Lou Ritchie was long gone by the time the Blues Brothers came along, and he's not remembered because he was to those Cubs teams what a pitcher like Ramiro Mendoza, let's say, was to the 2001 Yankees. Someone who contributed to a pennant winner, but not to a championship team, at least not that year, and wasn't in the first rank of its stars. Maybe not in the second rank either. That great Cubs run spanned 1904 through 1912. They won 4 pennants and 2 World Series, and then they fell off for most of the next 15 years. Yeah, they won the NL pennant during the shortened 1918 season, but in retrospect, deep retrospect, since it's been going on 107 years now, that club was a fluke. And there's probably a good story in there, a good team-building story, and we should look into it at some point. The inning is infinite, but time is not, at least not for those of us who prepare podcasts. So you'll hear me say that almost every week. We should get back to this, and sometimes we do, and sometimes it just stays on a pile that mounts ever higher. I'm sure you're familiar with this phenomenon in your own life. Ritchie came in towards the end of those big Cubs years, the Tinker Evers, not Evers, I am told, Chance, Three-Finger Brown years. He came up with the Phillies in 1906, as some players are wont to do, pitched really well without breaking into their rotation on a full-time basis, spent some time with the Braves, pitched well again. They called him Lurid Lou, and also the Giant Killer, a name that has affixed itself to a few pitchers over the years because they did really well against New York. And then San Francisco. Have we had post-New York Giant Killers? Maybe, because the Giants are now in California, everybody's more mellow about it. You can't be a giant killer. You're just like a big drag. You're not a giant killer, man. You're just a giant buzzkill. You're a giant downer, okay? Why don't you just get out of here? Can't find parking? Well, take that as a hint, why don't you? True story, my sister went to college in Boston, and when she graduated, I drove a van up to help her move out. And as we got to the Boston city limits and passed through what I think is the final, or at least back then, was the final toll booth on the Mass Pike. We pull out of the booth, we pay the toll. I think it was before Easy Pass. And as we pull out, not doing anything wrong, we're in our lane, not doing anything obtrusive, someone from the next car shouts, "Why don't you go back to Jersey?" And you know, that has colored my perception of Boston ever since. And every time I've been back, and I've been back a lot of times, I feel this moment of discomfort because I just know I'm not welcome in Boston. It really is a mark of my own insecurity that at that moment, and ever since, I just assumed that a city of, something like 700,000 people got together, had some kind of meeting, a plebiscite, and that guy on the Massachusetts Turnpike, he was speaking for all of them. He was the ambassador to New Jersey, telling me to stay in my place, and I'm just thinking, well, that could happen in San Francisco, too. The Cubs picked up Lou Ritchie, Lurid Lou, from the Braves in exchange for outfielder Doc Miller, a dentist. Inevitably, they were dentists, except for Bobby Brown, in May 1910, and he went 11-4 the rest of the way. In 1911, he was a regular in the rotation for one of the only times in his career, and he went 15-11 with a 2.31 ERA, which was quite good, more than a run below the league average. Although, we're still talking about the dead ball, that year, the National League switched to a cork-centered ball made by the Reach Company. and offense ticked up quite a bit. So a 231 is a 231, 2.31 for those of you who are sticklers for the decimal point. I never know which is preferable. I think for most of the run of this podcast, I've said 2.31, but 231 is what people say. Rickey was kind of a goofball, and manager Frank Chance said that he was worth the price of his contract just because he kept everyone so loose and relaxed. I'd keep that fellow if both his arms were cut off just to cheer up the crowd. I'm doing sort of a high voice for Frank Chance because it's said that due to his deafness, he spoke with a high, whistling voice. He beats the night's rest. I don't know if he sounded like that. He was from California. Maybe he sounded like my California guy. He beats a night's rest. One day, as a joke, everybody from England and everybody from California should change places. And when people got off their planes in, say, San Diego or London, everybody would sound wrong. The original sports writer, almost the original sports writer, Fred Lieb, referred to him in one piece as the Ambler humanist, that's wishful thinking, the Ambler humorist, a reference to Rickey's Pennsylvania hometown. Ring Lardner wrote in 1912 that whereas many players were of German descent and others of Irish extraction, Rickey claims to be part Persian, part Welsh, part Indian, and part wild man from Borneo. To pass the time on long train rides, Rickey and Cubs teammates like Jimmy Sheckard and Solly Hoffman made up an alternative history of baseball in which it began in biblical times, and it had quite the continuity to it. Ring Lardner, who was on the beat back then, wrote about it several times, and I don't know how much embellishing he did himself, but he wrote things like, "It seems that Sheckard is over 10,000 years old, and that Rickey and Hoffman are only a few hundred years younger. All three of them played ball in Old Testament times. In those days, Sheckard's name was Sheckardi, with accent on the second syllable. Hoffman's was Hoffmansky, and Rickey's was Rishva. The great game of baseball was started by Moses, and the first organized ball was played in the Ark League, of which Noah was president. Sheckardi, Hoffmansky, and Rishva all played in this circuit, the three being members of Ham's team, which was pushed hard for the championship by the club of which Shem was manager. On the 10th of August, in the year 6000 BC, it began to rain, and it rained for 40 days. The season ended before the 1st of October. Anyhow, there were 40 postponed games to be played on the last day, and these were all between the Hams and Shems, which, incidentally, were the only two clubs in the league. In my belated opinion, Rickey's best act was his most self-abnegating. Well, that's not right. It was self-protective. It was also funny, but it was there to deflect criticism before criticism could be made. He would always get the players laughing, his teammates, I mean, whenever he was lifted from a game, because he would begin to berate himself even before he left the mound. "Rickey, you're a lousy, rotten pitcher. You can't throw a ball within 10 feet of the plate, and it's a wonder some batter doesn't knock the few brains you have out of you with a line drive." I can identify with that sort of self-critical commentary. Maybe you're free from it, but that's all the mail I receive from home, by which I mean my own mind. Why does it hate me when all I try to do is leave it alone? All I know for certain, and it's counterintuitive, is that for Rickey, that's what kept him out of the infinite inning. Back better than ever for 2025. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the show. Oh boy, have I missed you guys during that long layoff. It went a little longer than I had initially planned. I had more than my share of distractions, including a little medical interlude, which seems to have cleared up now. I kind of thought I was going to need to have another, internal plunging, let's call it, but that seems to have cleared up. And the book that I've been alluding to on and off, I kind of went Captain Ahab with it for a bit, just got a little bit obsessive, and I still am. I'm still over-researching, still over-writing, and underthinking. This is a very bad habit to be in if your occupation is anything like mine. Indeed, if your occupation is, well, any occupation, you should just get along with it. The shark must keep swimming, and I have been sort of treading water in a way. It's kind of a fun spot to tread it in, but my anxiety built as I continued to stay in place, gathering ever more information around me, but not placing it on the page. I did, actually. That's not fair. Let's be fair to your host, Stephen Goldman, of this here podcast, a journey to understanding the present via a trip to the past, and our vehicle, as is almost always the case, is the great game of baseball. Sometimes other things, as you know, if you've been here for a while. If this is your first time, welcome. This is episode 313. Collect them, trade them, and there isn't continuity in the sense that, yes, I will call back to other episodes. Sometimes I'll say, hey, we previously talked about this feller back in episode 127, and they're all out there and you can look them up. I do that as a service to you. It's not meant to put pressure on you. It's not like you won't understand the story of Superman versus Darkseid if you don't have his first appearance by Jack Kirby in some issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. On the other hand, given how many episodes we've done, if there's a particular baseball story that you're looking for, or say the origins of NATO, well, I might have done that in one of the prior 7 years that this show has run. Just look back in the old catalog. Here's a kind of downer addendum to the Lou Ritchie story. I didn't want to throw it in at the beginning. It didn't go to the theme. But as the anonymous writer of a 1912 New York Times story on a very bad Yankees or Highlanders loss wrote, here's one that will bring the weeps. Play on, Professor, a little more of that funeral march. And the reason that I say it's a downer is because Lou Ritchie did not live very long. Tuberculosis scythed through his entire family. He had a number of siblings. About half of them predeceased him due to tuberculosis, and it caught up with him as well at a relatively young age. He got longer than his siblings did, but the disease did end his pitching career, and then maybe a decade or so later, it ended him. We are very, very fortunate to live in the age of vaccines. Here's something else I came across. I don't have a particular place to put it, but I had this experience, so I wanted to share it with you. This comes from a profile of Frankie Frisch somewhere in the 1920s, the great Giants infielder, not so great manager, very bad Veterans Committee member. But I came across this item. In one of his earlier capers, Frisch was put out of a game in the Polo Grounds and headed for the clubhouse in center field by a circuitous route to annoy the umpires. He accidentally stepped through the wrong door, wandered beneath the stands, and found himself standing on 8th Avenue, locked out of the park in his uniform. He drew a crowd of autograph seekers until a policeman rescued him. This happened to me once many years ago when not quite paying attention to what I was doing and thinking I was taking an elevator from my hotel room to the lobby to get a Coke or a pack of chewing gum or something. I didn't press the lobby button. I pressed the invisible unmarked button, hit the ground floor, not quite paying attention to where I was, stepped out of the elevator. The elevator door closed behind me, and I looked up to realize that I was in a darkened basement area with, to borrow from Disney World, no windows and no doors. I turned to get the elevator back, but there was no call button. The wall was completely smooth. And to cut to the end, I wandered about in the darkness of this hotel's basement for a while, my heart beating quite rapidly with claustrophobia, until I stumbled my way to some sort of loading dock where there was necessarily a door, and I emerged not only in back of the hotel, but at the foot of the hill that the hotel, heretofore unnoticed by me, had been built on. So I swore, and then I walked around the large property, climbed back up the hill, entered the lobby from the outside, hesitantly got back on the elevator, and returned to my wife, who, predictably, and she wasn't yet my wife, but I married her anyway, hadn't yet begun to wonder why I'd been away for something like half an hour, just trying to get a pack of chewing gum from the gift shop. Since I left you, as we segue into the bulletin board section, since we last gathered in these Hallow Halls, I've written, I believe, 3 pieces for Baseball Prospectus. One I had not planned to write, but it was on the passing of Rickey Henderson, one of the greatest players of all time, someone, as I described in the piece, I had a chance to be around on one occasion. I've talked about that here on the podcast, and who for a while was a bone of contention between me and my dad. This is back when I was a teenager, so all of those things came together for me in that story. And if you seek it out, it's called A Candle for Rickey, and I hope you like it. I also wrote a story that inspired isn't the right word. There was sort of a rush of dread that came out with the shooting that happened in New Orleans, the massacre that happened on New Year's Eve. And somehow in my mind that connected to the day back at the start of the 20th century. That's not surprising if you know me, when the Polo Grounds burned, which was a totally different thing. But you'll see how I tied it all together. And finally, this week, I wrote about Butts Wagner. As part of our ongoing subtle subscription drive at Baseball Prospectus, I opened things up on Blue Sky to anyone who was a new subscriber. Show me proof of a new subscription. I do not get a taste, but I just like doing this. And I will write a story just for you. And someone, being funny, I think that was the intention, asked me to write about Hans Wagner's older brother, Butts. And what I did with it, it's called The Butts of the Joke. You can find it on Baseball Prospectus as usual. If this is the sort of thing you like, by which I mean this show, then you will like that sort of thing as well. And as long as you're liking this sort of thing, let's proceed to our second segment of the show after a brief break. I'm just easing back into things, so I'm not sure how long this one is going to last. A story should be the length that it needs to be told correctly. So I'm not going to truncate it or push it harder. We're just going to explore and see where we go. That's the fun of this thing for both of us, I hope. So take a moment, listen to the ads if you don't mind, or at least let them play. Grab yourself a tall, cool one. I'm not saying one what. And then come back for the tale of a momentary Cardinals pitcher, Hank Górnicki, whose claim to fame was that he was Polish. Did you know he was Polish? Yeah, he was Polish. When he was pitching, they never let you forget it, in the same way that when Mike Piazza was playing, they never let you forget his draft position. What's more interesting to me, though, is what he did. And I don't know. Hank Górnicki, what did you do?
Tonight, old man, you did it. You did it. You did it. You said that you would do it, and indeed you did. I thought that you would rue it. I doubted you'd do it. But now I must admit it, that succeed you did. You should get a medal or be even made a knight.
So it was nothing. Really nothing.
Stop by Sherwin-Williams and get 30% off select paints and stains May 2nd through the 12th. It's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Refresh your home inside and out with colors that make every space feel brand new. From cozy interiors to stunning exteriors, we've got the perfect shade for your next project. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Was it nothing, though? As I said before the break, I don't know a whole lot about pitcher Hank Górnicki, except that the newspapers could not let an appearance go by without mentioning, yes, that he was a son of Poland. I also sense that Branch Rickey really did not like him. Górnicki had a very brief career. He didn't come up until he was 30. That was in the portentous year of 1941, though he did have the good fortune to come up with a team that was about to be very good, Branch Rickey's Cardinals. Not that he got to be part of that. That aspect of things didn't go well, and then he had a couple of years of bouncing around the National League before military service carried him off. He got 7 games in with the Pirates when he returned from the war, but he was 35 by then. He was with a dead-end club, and the end came quickly. He finished with a career record of 15-19, but his ERA was .338, which wasn't bad, 285 innings. And there were moments. Take this August 17th, 1943, Pirates-Braves doubleheader. Please, Górnicki started Game 1 for the Pirates against a pretty depressing wartime Braves lineup. The Braves had 2 players on the field that day who would eventually get to be pretty good, center fielder Tommy Holmes and third baseman Eddie Joost, but as the word eventually suggests, they weren't there yet. The Pirates actually had a much better lineup. Future NL MVP Bob Elliott started at third, former Braves first baseman L.B. Fletcher, one of the great on-base machines, was playing the same position for Pittsburgh, and the most neglected DiMaggio, also a former Brave, Vince, played center, and future Hall of Famer Al Lopez caught. Lopez is in mostly as a manager, or 75% in as a manager, and 25% for being the most durable version of Joe Girardi with the all-time record for games caught until Jim Sundberg and Carlton Fisk came along, I think in that order if I recall. They too have since been surpassed, of course. The game was a whitewash for the Pirates, their hitters scoring 8 runs, and Gornicki pitching a 6-hit shutout, walking 2, K-ing 6. The nightcap was more competitive, with the Braves starting a quality veteran, Deacon Danny McFadden, and I suppose, since we are talking about the wartime era, I should be careful when I say veteran. I don't mean that he was a veteran of the military services, but a veteran pitcher in the major leagues. I find McFadden fascinating because, and I'm sure I've mentioned this many times, first, he was one of the few players who in his off hours invented his own tabletop baseball game, and I'd love to know what that was like. But what's more interesting is that he was one of the original not everyone can pitch in New York, Susan guys, in that his ERA with the Red Sox, which was the team he came up with, he was a Massachusetts guy, was a little better than league average. Later with the Braves, his ERA, a little better than league average. Sure, better pitcher's park, but he was doing things like in 1936 going 17-13 with a 2.87 ERA, 1938 14-9, 2.95 ERA. He was a good pitcher. He was a command guy, not a strikeout guy, even for that era. I think he was a ground ball guy. He didn't allow very many home runs at all. But in between, he went to the Yankees and had an ERA scraping 5. And these were good Yankees teams. We're talking about the tail end of the Babe Ruth era. And he was on the 32 team, the called shot team. And he was also around in 1933 and 1934, which were not years that the Yankees won, but they weren't bad clubs. They were 90-win clubs that just happened to be missing, well, the pitching. And he was part of that. He was so bad that the Yankees sold him to the Reds in November, and the Reds gave him back. That was in November 1934. I should have said not just November, any November. You pick the November. So, as I was saying, Game 1 of this doubleheader with the Pirates, Gornicki goes out and pitches a 3-hitter. Game 2, Danny McFadden starts against the Pirates, throwing out one Xavier Racino, who, to be totally honest, I have never thought of before this very moment. Nickname Mr. X. I wish that Mr. X had been a good pitcher, but he was not, and he did not pitch well that day, allowing 12 hits and 2 walks in 8 1/3 innings. And yet, the Braves were just not built to capitalize, partly through their own fecklessness, partly due to Hitler. And so the Pirates actually led 3-2 going to the 9th, but Mr. X allowed a single and a double with 1 out, and Bucco's manager, Frankie Frisch, here he is again, went to the bullpen. There wasn't an obvious candidate. This was pretty much a closer-free team, a fireman-free team even. The Pirates were in the house when the house burned down. And it wasn't just Frisch or lack of available talent due to the war, but rather this was also still an era dominated by starting pitching. No team had great relief pitching that year, and in the context of being below average, as the Pirates were, from our point of view, it's like having no relief pitching at all. And what I'm trying to say is that rather than go to Dave Righetti or Doug Jones or somebody like that, Frisch called Gornicki into the game. I guess he hadn't cooled off yet from game 1. He was still limber. So Frisch calls Gornicki into the game, then has him intentionally walk his first batter to load the bases and try to get a double play. He didn't. He gave up a sacrifice fly and things were tied, but he did get out of the inning, and so the game went on, and he stayed in long enough for the Pirates to take the lead, and then pitched the bottom of the 11th, retiring the Braves in order for his second win of the day. The very next game, the next day, the Pirates went to New York to play a very bad Giants team, one of the worst in modern franchise history. The game again went into extra innings. Frankie Frisch, one-trick pony, can only hold the name of one pitcher in his mind at a time. And so on comes Gornicki in relief, and again was credited with the win. So 2 days, 3 wins, 12 2/3 innings, no runs. Even today, with relievers working constantly, I don't think that happens all that often. Gornicki was born in Niagara Falls, but had a, quote, flourishing farm in Jackson County, North Carolina, and was described as kind of a hillbilly, so I'm not really sure what his life's trajectory was. All I do know is that he was a half-decent pitcher, but he couldn't hold a job. How did he get from the Cardinals to the Pirates? Well, in the Sporting News, they wrote, the transfer of Gornicki came as no surprise. For some reason, the Cardinals' bosses soured on the 6-foot 1-inch right-hander, and they had cooked up a deal with the Cubs. And indeed, he did pitch for the Cubs for a half-second, but that deal was voided by Judge Landis, the commissioner, for reasons of violating the waiver rules, and so Rickey took him back and then subsequently dealt him to the Pirates. Somehow that was okay. Hank Gornicki, young Polish right-hander, they called him. That was in September 1942. He was close to turning 33. So he goes to the Pirates, pitches a 2-hit shutout against the Braves, and also homers. He hit those off of the Braves' Jim Tobin, by the way, who was one of the few pitchers to hit 3 home runs in a game. But there you have another big day by Hank Gornicki, young Polish right-hander. But there was also stuff like this at about the same time. Pitcher Hank Gornicki, right-hander, purchased from the Cardinals, was fined, suspended, and ordered to Pittsburgh when the Bucks were in Wichita, Kansas. Gornicki was charged with breaking training rules. Frisch had held a meeting the day before to set down behavior rules for the season, and Frank said Gornicki did not return to the hotel until 3 o'clock that morning. And so they sent him back to Pittsburgh from Wichita, a fate worse than death. Go from Wichita, Vacation City, USA, to Pittsburgh? Oh, no. I've sort of told this story backwards because I think behavior rules, which were usually code for excessive drinking, might be at the heart of Branch Rickey's enmity for this journeyman pitcher. So to rewind, not so young Hank, which I suppose we can shorten in 2000 style to No So Yo Hank, started pitching in the minors in 1936 when he was 25 years old. I don't know what he was doing until then. Maybe going to college, possibly riding the rails, or roaming the West as a bounty hunter. A young Polish man with no name, bringing the worst offenders to justice. He was pitching in the Cardinals chain and pitched decently, but he was old and so was having trouble getting out of the 3I league. If you're 26 or 27 and you're pitching in the lower minors, then or now, you'd better suddenly invent a trick pitch or unlock some heretofore unsuspected Randy Johnson imitation, or you're not going to make it up to the big leagues. He finally got to Rochester, the Cardinals' top farm team, in 1940. When he was 29, pitched 5 shutouts for them, and was invited to spring training in 1941. By special permission, he lived away from other squad members with his wife and baby daughter Elaine at a beach cottage. He was the only man not taking vitamin B1 tablets. Branch Rickey was on a vitamin kick that year. The Cardinals were going to overcome the opposition with vim. Hey folks, are your pitchers dragging? Do they look drowsy and droopy just before lunchtime? Then give them a shot of vim. Also, give them a shot of Stan Musial. That's really what solved the problem for the Cardinals. Gornicki was described as a cool, seemingly nervous workman. The unusually gaunt and lean pitcher specializes in a deceptive fastball. And again, at his age, you'd have to rely on deception. He drove down to St. Petersburg for spring training and, mere blocks away from Cardinals camp, got into a head-on collision with another car, at which point, when the police showed up, it turned out his car had no plates on it. Well, no one was hurt. He wasn't arrested for stealing a car, so okay, although it does make one wonder about his sobriety. Although, did he have his wife and kid in the car with him? That's scary. On the brighter side, by which I mean not day drinking, getting into a head-on collision with your wife and kid in the car, not getting arrested for stealing your own car, was that, at last, he made the team. He was one of the deeper bullpen options, but still, he was in the show. Pitchers were still throwing a ton of complete games then, as I said earlier. So if you were buried in the bullpen, you were on a journey to the center of the earth. And at first, Gornicki was seldom used. But in early May, the Cardinals' rotation was unsettled. And on a road trip to Philadelphia, Gornicki, hey, did you know he was Polish? He got a chance to start, said the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Scientist Billy Southworth conducted another experiment on the National League's prize guinea pigs today and came up with a discovery as important to the Cardinals as the vitamin B1 they've been wolfing down all spring. One prize guinea pigs, the Phillies. They were so bad that was the highest compliment that you could pay them, I guess. And, of course, the discovery was Gornicki. It was time to gamble because the Phillies were miserable, as was always true at the time. It was May 3rd, 1941, a date which will live in Phillies infamy because Gornicki held the Phils, Chuck Klein and all, although a superannuated Chuck Klein, to one hit. He walked 5, struck out 5. The single by right fielder Stan Benjamin didn't come until the 6th. So what did manager Billy Southworth do with that information? What did general manager Branch Rickey do? Well, they gave Gornicki one more relief assignment and then sent him back to Rochester. Oh, Rochester, he pitched well, but never got another call, not from the Birds. And the official word was that Gornicki was sent down because the Cardinals had too many good pitchers. But Rickey also let something slip to a Brooklyn writer about the pitcher, who, by the way, was Polish. That man will never pitch for the Cardinals. I will sell him. Well, what the hell did he do? In September, as I said, Rickey sold him first to the Cubs, and then, when that trade was voided on technical grounds, to the Pirates. It seems like right before that, though, he almost reconsidered. Late in the minor league campaign, when Rochester was in the playoffs, Rickey sent word that he was about to call up a series of Red Wings, almost all of whom were somehow Polish. That included Gornicki, Whitey Kurowski, Irv Dusak, and, I hinted at this before, a young feller named Stan Musial. Well, as we've already covered, Gornicki did make it back to the majors, not in St. Louis. I don't think the Cardinals were too sorry, though, to win a few World Series without him, especially with Kurowski becoming an all-star third baseman despite his arms being 2 different lengths, and Musial, a genial god of baseball. But as for Gornicki, what did he do? What did he do? Maybe he just walked around the clubhouse all day saying, Nov schmaz kapop? Yes, I'm not off of that yet. Should you wish to follow me on social media, I'm not off of that either. You can do so at stephengoldman.bsky.social. You can write us, by which I mean me, at infiniteinning@gmail.com. And for the moment, there is a Facebook group. I am getting the hell out of Dodge finally. Go to Facebook, search on Infinite Inning, and as best I can promise it, we will be an island free of pro-Nazi, anti-trans propaganda. Thank you very much. Should you wish to support the show, and I very much hope you do, please go to patreon.com/the-infinite-inning, gear of a rudimentary kind available at teespring.com/store/the-infinite-inning, original soundtrack available gratis at casualobservermusic.bandcamp.com. And finally, should you find yourself with the proverbial moment to spare, please go to the podcatcher of your choice and rate, review, and subscribe, because the better those numbers, the more discovery we get, and discovery is how this show continues to thrive. And if your podcatcher doesn't let you do those things, tell a friend. Our theme song, which you are listening to now and have been hearing throughout the episode, was a co-composition of myself and Dr. Rick Mooring, who says the paradox of experience is that it doesn't serve anyone if it's not disseminated. Knowledge sealed in a bottle, tossed in the ocean, and ignored might as well never have come to light in the first place. Well, now that those holidays are out of the way, assuming we're not going to have any more holidays because they're going to be banned or outlawed or something by the incoming administration, I'll be back next week with more tales from inside the Infinite Inning.